Welcome everybody to Red's Ramblings. I have with me today Janet from over in Canberra, Australia. I'm originally from London, but been in Australia for 11 years. Janet, why don't you go ahead and tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jamie. So I have been here for about 11 years, as Jamie said, and my name is Janet Cafferdar. I am an online business coach and career exit strategist for women of colour who are looking to exit out of their 9 to 5s and really start their own online coaching businesses. But yeah, I've had a very varied experience living here in Australia, but it's been great. It's been really, really good. Loved it.
Well, that's definitely good to hear. I got to ask now then, so you're from London originally. What made you come to Australia or go to Australia?
Yeah, so my husband got a job out here, so back
Yeah.
then, and got offered a job to come out here, and it was kind of one of those things like, okay, let's go, let's just see what happens, let's see how it all turns out,
Yeah.
and yeah, and that's it. And now we live here. Now we've got 3 kids. Well, when I moved here, I moved out here with just a backpack and one of those traveling backpacks,
Oh, yeah.
and yeah, moved out here. And that was it. That's all I had. We had shipped up, our things out beforehand and waiting for them to arrive. So for a good 3 months, I was just living out of the stuff that I had. But it was good. It was good stuff. But prior to that, I'd already spent a year pretty much traveling around the world. So that was like 2006, 2007. Bought myself a round the world ticket and was like, right, see what happens. And that was it.
Hey.
Yeah, it was good. It was really good. Loved it.
All right. Well, before we get into more Australian things, then what other places around the world have you been to, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, sure. So on that round the world trip, I went to Canada. Canada was my first stop. So I was on the East Coast first. I was there, then went up the coast a little bit, went as far as what's the name of the province now? The province is called, it's going to come to me, it's Newfoundland. So went from Toronto all the way up to Newfoundland and then went back down again and flew over to Vancouver, did a bit more traveling there, went up the Rocky Mountains and back down again, and then went to New Zealand. So from Canada, went to New Zealand, loved it there, beautiful place.
Oh, man. That's the place I want to find somebody to talk to them for sure.
Yes, yeah, it's absolutely stunning. Loved it.
Yes.
Loved being there. Loved the people. Loved being there. My best friend at the time was in Queenstown in the ski area. So she had like a ski. She was there for pretty much the whole winter, and so I met up with her there. Did a bit of traveling around there and stayed in Wellington, in the capital for probably about another 2 months or so. Stayed there for a bit, then left, then went to Australia for a couple of days, and then went to Thailand, traveled around Thailand for the rest of my time, really.
Yeah.
And then went to Singapore, and then I came home. So yeah, that was my round the world trip. My goodness, when I think about it now, my God, I really went quite far. But it was great. And other places I've visited, I've been to America as well, and places around Europe as well. So yeah, amazing. I feel blessed.
I've been to a few states in the States.
Yeah.
Haven't been out abroad just yet. Hopefully, when me and my wife got married, we had planned on a honeymoon in Scotland.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
Yeah, so hopefully, we're still going to do it, just when we're going to do it, who knows now.
Exactly, whenever that happens.
Yeah, don't know when, but it's still in the works. It's still a plan for sure.
Yeah, nice.
So since you've been there in Canberra, Australia, from London, because I spoke to 2 brothers from Liverpool about a month ago, I want to say at this point.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest differences? Because obviously Britain used to control Australia for a while. So I'm assuming there's a fair amount of similarities between the 2 areas. But what are some of the big differences that, I guess, caught you off guard?
Yeah, it's one of those things like it's so it's still Australia's still under the Commonwealth So the Queen is still head of state for Australia, just like in the UK. But I think one of the biggest things, weather being one of them
Oh
by
yeah.
far.
Oh yeah.
Weather is just like, it's nothing prepares you. And where I live in Canberra, it's not like in Sydney. So Sydney's about 3 hours a drive away from here. If you get on a plane, it's like 50 minutes or something. So it's not far away, but it's really humid there. And Canberra has no humidity like whatsoever. So it's really dry. When it's wet, it's like raining, but it's really dry. There's like no humidity. Same with the in the summertime, like it's incredibly intensely hot. It's like, I can't explain it. It's like when you have an oven, you know, you put your oven on in the kitchen or whatever, it's that same heat. So it's just intense and like really oppressive, which is not something I'm used to. You know, in London, you know, you're lucky if you get like 25 degrees Celsius. It's just, you'd be lucky in the summer. But that was one of the really big differences for me. But then also the size. Now, this sounds crazy, but the size and the distance of how big Australia is. Like, and it's like when you're in the States, right? So you say, oh yeah, I'm in New York, or so this happens to me. So I had a friend who was in New York and I was in Toronto. I was like, I looked on the map, I was like, oh, it's not so far, like maybe I can drive, I'll just hire a car and I'll come see you. No, like it's like, it's so far. It's that same kind of thing, and you don't grasp the concept of how big the country is until you're living here or until you're there yourself. So that for me, I think was one of the biggest things. So coming from the UK, which is like tiny, everything's so close by, and you can hop on a train and you can be in Wales in like 2 hours, 3 hours. But you know, here it just doesn't work like that. So that's one thing I really had to kind of get my head around and really understand, like, oh, okay, so it's not so close. So that was one of the biggest things, I think, the weather and the sheer size. So I think someone told me that the UK fits, if it were to fit into Australia, fits into Australia 33 times. And I was like, whoa. Okay. Yeah. I get it.
Yes. That's actually not that different from Gregoire, who I spoke to, who's in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And he's originally from Canada. And I asked him the same question. First thing he said was the weather. You know, because you go from Canada, which you've been to Canada, so really cold, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then Australia, hot, humid, all of that. That's a complete 180. And he said that was a big thing. He mentioned, and it probably kind of similar to you, because London's a lot colder as well than Australia is. Is he would like go out in the winter and the neighbors, like, he'd be out in shorts and a tank top or whatever, and the neighbors like, are you okay, are you sick? And like, it's cold, why aren't you bundled up? And he's like, y'all don't know what cold is.
Yeah, exactly, you have no idea.
So I think definitely between both of y'all, has to be a huge difference for sure. Very cold original climates, definitely, yes.
Yes, yeah. And I think in the UK, like I had, you know, I would always go in public transport because no one ever drives there. Everyone takes public transport because it's great anyway. So I always have like a big coat, and I have my hat and scarf and all of that. I'm like completely rugged up. And I have one coat in the 11 years I've been living here. I have one coat that I bought the first year I moved here, and I haven't bought it ever since. I haven't even used it this winter. Like, it just, you don't even, it's cold, but it's not the same. It's not the same at all. But yeah, those are the biggest differences. And I think culturally is pretty much the same. Like, the Brits and the Australians are very similar personalities. There's not many differences there, but I think if you were to go more regionally, so spread out in the smaller communities, then I'd see more of a difference. But here in the city, then Canberra's a capital, so it's pretty multicultural, pretty diverse as it is. But yeah, I think I would notice more of that if I were living somewhere more rural or a smaller community.
Yeah, I do remember looking into more things about Australia in general, and seeing that a lot of the major cities are around the outskirts of the island. And well, one, because you're close to the water and a lot more bearable climates, you could say, in my opinion,
Yes.
anyway. And then towards the center, it's, all the wildlife and, the Aboriginal tribes still here and there spread
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things I looked at when looking into Cambria, because I think I might have heard it from Gregoire, but if not, I definitely learned it when looking into Cambria for you, that I didn't know. Like I was one of those typical thought that either Melbourne or Sydney was the capital, because those
Yeah.
are
Interesting.
very popular cities for Australia. Everyone knows Sydney Opera House, right?
Yeah.
Everyone probably heard that or seen the picture.
Yeah.
And I remember reading about Melbourne here and there throughout, growing up. But so I would have figured Sydney was the capital, in my opinion. And then I look into it, and it's Cambria. And I looked into how and why they decided to name it or to have it as Cambria. Do you know anything about the history of Cambria?
Yeah, so I think the reason that I don't know why it was chosen, but Parliament was placed here. So there's actually, we have two parliaments. So we have Old Parliament House, which is the smaller original
Yes.
Parliament, which is tiny, and then a good 20 years later, then they built this big massive one, which is gorgeous, and it's almost like a monument within the city. If you're going closer to the center of the city, you can see it and it really stands out. It's beautiful. But yeah, I don't know why it was originally placed here. I think probably because it's not too far from Sydney, not too far from Melbourne as well, and which are the other two populated states as well. And then Canberra became the home and the capital, really. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I should know that, really, but I'm not all into that politics. It's just a bit crazy.
Well, don't worry. I looked into it for you.
Okay, good. Good.
So, because I had to figure out why Cambria over Sydney and Melbourne. And according to what I was looking at, is at one point they were fighting, like Melbourne and Sydney were fighting over who's going to be the capital, right?
Yeah.
And it was in the early 1900s. Yeah. So they were still the biggest cities even back then.
Yeah.
And whatever, I'm assuming the Parliament back then wanted to find a neutral ground away from these two.
Yeah.
So they put out like a petition of various places, like, hey, you guys pick, right? And come to find out, they picked where Cambria is right now, and then they even put out a questionnaire, or I can't think of the word right now, of how to name it and what to name it, because it wasn't originally called Cambria. So some of the names that originally were put up for option was Kookaburra, Wheatwool Gold.
Okay.
And I'm probably butchering how you pronounce these.
It's all right.
Kangaroo, which that makes sense, kangaroos and whatnot.
Yeah.
And another one was basically a mesh of all the popular cities in Australia at the time. So one of them was Sid Mel Para Rad Bisharo. Like,
wow.
Brisbane, all those mashed into one name.
Yeah.
And like you said, politics got involved and people started being petty, right? So some of the names that were actually up for option was Swindleville,
okay,
Gone Broke, and Cactus City. Which that made me laugh, because I remember there was a rocket that was made, and it was a boat that had been made, and the company put out like, hey, name our boat for us, and people were throwing out some of the most ridiculous names ever, right?
Yeah.
And that makes sense in the modern times here, but to hear, like, even in the early 1900s, people still had a sense of humor, like, all right, well, I'm gonna name it this.
Yes,
off the wall. That was hilarious.
But I do have to say that some of the names, though, that may have been chosen. So the first one that you said was Kookaburra. So Kookaburra is a type of bird here in Australia. And actually, when it sings and when you hear it, it sounds like a monkey. It's like, is a really weird noise, and they're beautiful birds. So I think some of the names that besides the one that was all a complete mesh of all of them, may have been traditional names, or either Aboriginal names, or could have been traditional landowners. So one of the things, kind of coming back to one of the main differences. So here in Australia, I've worked a lot with government as well in past jobs that I've had. When you do some sort of address, so whether it's a gathering of people who are from out of state, or a public gathering, or government are doing something, they always have to address the traditional landowners of that area.
Yes.
So here in Canberra, they always say, we would like, before they even say anything, they get up to the mic, and the first thing they say is, we would like to address and acknowledge the traditional landowners of this land. So here in Canberra, traditional landowners are the Ngunnawal people. That's spelt.
Oh no, I know what.
Yeah, you've seen it.
Well, yes.
You found it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So the traditional landowners, which is one of the things that I didn't know when I first got here, and I found it incredibly humbling. That's what's done, and to recognize, yes, there's been many. We could go into that in way more detail, but I think it's so important to acknowledge the people that lived on the land before, who had it before us, who have done all the work to kind of get it to where it is now. And I think that's a really poignant thing for me. The big difference than in the UK. In the UK, you don't address the traditional landowners. Like, that doesn't even exist. Who is that?
Exactly.
I don't even know who that is.
You just turn to your dad. Hey, thanks, Father.
Yeah, exactly right. But here is a big thing where you have to do that. So, and it's the same across all of the states as well, and you have to do that public address. So I think it's great, especially like big conferences, big gatherings where people come together. You have to acknowledge that before you start.
Yeah, that is because that is one thing I looked in as well. Not necessarily that's how they start an address for a big meeting. When I didn't look into that, but I did find that they still they are very what's the word I'm thinking of? They still recognize the native people, and still hold them in high regards like that.
Yes.
Because that was where the name Canberra actually came from, was Ngunnawal word, which stands for meeting place.
Meeting place, yeah.
Came to be. And hearing you say that about how they respect them, and they let them know that, hey, thank you. Mm-hmm. We know, hey, kind of, we're here now, but you came before us, and we're here because of you, essentially.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, not to get too far into how we are over here, but
I hear you.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
The complete opposite.
I completely hear you. And the same, and that's very similar. I don't know if that same kind of address is done in New Zealand as well, but there's the Maori people as well in New Zealand, and they're still acknowledged and still recognized throughout their culture and through everything that they do. I think even more so, I would say, than Australia. So I think I think it's so important to do that, because we're small, we're really tiny. Like, even like Australia is 25 million people or something. Like, it's tiny in comparison to other places. Yeah, exactly. So I think it's good.
One of the things that also caught me off guard that I didn't know is Canberra is how we consider DC, Washington DC. It's a district, so it's not a state. It doesn't really have the same what's the word? I am losing my words today.
It's okay, don't worry.
But it doesn't have a lot of the same responsibilities as a typical state would.
Yeah.
And Canberra is the same way, mainly because they didn't want to have any state or province have ownership of the national capital, which I always thought that the states were weird about that, but I understood why they did it. Not to the neighboring states, like, hey, you might have the biggest city, but we have the capital. I know you don't. So now I'm wondering, like, if there are any other countries around the world that kind of have the same sort of setup for their nation capitals as well. Because that
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know, but I know that so there's two states. So we call them states and territories. So the ACT where Canberra is a territory, and we also have where Darwin is in the north, the Northern Territory, which is also a territory, just like the ACTs, just like where Canberra is. But all the others are regarded as states. And living here, you actually don't know the difference. You can't tell the difference between the two. But but every state, just like in the US, every state has their own set of rules, own set of legislation, own set of, that taxes are across the board, all across Australia, but all have ever so slight differences. But there isn't really anything that you can in your everyday life where you can clearly distinguish between, the two, like a territory or a state. But yeah, I get what you're saying, and it'll be interesting. Yeah, I'd be interested to know if it applies to any other country. But yeah, a bit like DC, where it's more like a district than it is an
it's
actual
its own
like
thing.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know that in with some of the buildings, I know that with buildings and stuff around the Parliament House. So this kind of goes a little bit deep, but within the Commonwealth, so Commonwealth Australia, so that's like the big governing body where the Queen is part of the Commonwealth. There's land, so the Commonwealth own land around Parliament House, so where Parliament is. So no one can essentially build a building like next to it and make it like taller or something like that. Like yeah. So it's make it taller than Parliament House or whatever. It's all Commonwealth land around there, but around everywhere else, it's all ACT land. Oh God, it's all crazy. But yes, I learned that from my one of the jobs I was working in, which I found really interesting. I was like, oh, I didn't know that. So yeah.
I got you. Since you've been there now for over a decade,
yeah,
I was looking into some of like the national like monuments and parks and whatnot. And one of the ones that caught me off guard, didn't catch me off guard, but caught my eye. Definitely caught my eye. And I'm hoping you've been there so you can speak a little bit about it.
Yeah.
The National Gallery Sculpture Garden.
Yes, yeah, it's gorgeous.
Yes. Yeah, I have pictures pulled up, and I mean, I'm looking at a spider. I'm looking at like a wheel with blue ribbons. I'm looking at something that might be a rabbit. Some really, really cool stuff. And I've always been a fan of art like that.
Yes, yeah.
So it seems like you have been there. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so the sculpture garden, so they do change. So they like switch them out every now and again, or they'll move them or put them somewhere else and stuff. So where that gallery is, the National Gallery of Australia, sits close to where Parliament House is, so in the centre of town, and it sits on the water, so it's really beautiful. And this huge big building's got these like yellow big arches and big red things sticking out of it, like it's an incredible sculpture of itself, the building. But the garden itself is gorgeous, and they do have a lot of those sculptures all around, and they do weddings and stuff around there. It's just a really picturesque and pretty place. Like it's interesting because a lot of Canberra looks a lot the same. It's like all of this forest. They call it the bush capital. Because it's not like Sydney, it's not like Melbourne. It feels like a town, but it's not. It's small in the sense that it has that kind of town feeling to it, but everything's really spread out. But there's lots of nature in and around. Like at the back of my house, there's like a reserve, and I can walk and I'll probably see a couple of kangaroos. Whereas in Sydney or Melbourne, you won't see that. That just doesn't exist. You're like deep in city life. So it's really kind of has that bush element to it. And with the sculpture gardens, like it's really pretty. Like it's just gorgeous. Like, and especially at like springtime when it's starting to change and all the blossoms coming out, and it's a great little place for sure. You did your research. Well done.
I try. You spoke about springtime with the blossoms and all that.
Mm.
One of the things I don't think I have that one pulled up anymore. Oh, nope. Yes, I do. Maybe. But there's a flower festival.
Yes.
Boom.
Yeah.
Have you been there? I don't. I
It's
don't
called
have that one up.
Floriade.
Yes.
Yeah, Floriade. So Floriade happens what's August. So it's normally September, mid or to late September, I think. So that's when spring starts. So spring
Okay.
officially is the 1st of September here in Australia. And so Floriade happens for a month, and I've been pretty much almost every year. And it's beautiful. Like they plant all of these different plants and flowers and all of that, and it's just a celebration of spring, us getting out of winter, really. And it's a free event. You don't pay anything to get in. It's hosted by the government. They put on this amazing display for us each year, and then in the evenings as well, they have a whole thing called Night Fest, where it
Okay.
is basically where this is the same place, Floriade, and it's by the water as well. Then it's all lit up with these beautiful lights, and you can go and sit and watch outdoor movies, or there's like music playing, and you can get food and drink and all of that stuff, and it's beautiful. It's really nice. So yeah, Floriade is one of those things that everyone kind of love it or hate it. They kind of look forward to it because like, oh my god, yay, summer's on the way. I think that's more what it is. Like, oh, we made it out of the winter. And yeah, have that real celebration. But it's really nice, and I think now that I've got kids, they look forward to it more because there's things for them to do. And whereas before I like go around and oh yeah, it's just flowers, but for them they're like, oh, we can go and see this, and they are a huge Ferris wheel, and it's entertainment for them, and that kind of thing, stand up. And so it's really good. It's an amazing event.
Yeah, on that one, I read about that festival. Then there's also the National Folk Festival.
Yes, yeah, I haven't been
Which,
to that one. No.
okay, well, I'm just gonna assume by the title, National Folk, it's more of celebrating, like you said, the original tribes and surrounding cultures and whatnot. But I mean, I have pictures up, and it looks, I mean, it looks like any other festival, but I'm assuming there's a whole lot of, like, I'm looking at a lot of nightclubs, and
Yeah.
everyone's dressing up in costumes of, I'm assuming,
Yes.
various, tribes and culture and all that, music, parade, dancing in the streets and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks fun. It's a festival. How can you not enjoy a festival?
Exactly. What's not to enjoy? How can you not enjoy it? Yeah, I haven't been to the folk festival before, and I do know that they have like lots of people playing music and stuff. And I had a friend who went along, and she went with her daughter during the day. And I have to say that's one of the things that is pretty good. Like with the events that take place, all pretty family friendly. Like you can go with your kids. It's not like some festivals where you just can't go with your kids, but these ones, you can go during the day, and it's completely cool. And so it's a real, I'd say more, Canberra is very family orientated place. Like we have 2 universities here as well, but it's a lot of like family friendly things that can take place and stuff. Or maybe it's just because I have kids and that's what I'm looking for. But it's good. I really enjoy it. Like it's a good place to bring up kids and to hang out, and I feel it's a safe place as well. And it has that real small community feel as well to it. Whereas where I lived in London, yeah, I wouldn't feel so comfortable bringing up my kids in London. It's really rough, depending on where you live.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that was one of the things I seem to have gotten while I was looking into stuff for Canberra is, like you said, it's a big capital city, but it seemed, even just from looking at various, whether it be pictures or reading, certain articles, it had that small hometowny feel to it.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm going to assume is attributes to it is that it's a planned city. Like Sydney and Melbourne were there because they're right by the ocean, so they're big port cities.
Big ports, yeah.
So everyone goes there. It's huge, and that's obviously how they grew, right? But Canberra was planned. It was built. It was actually, and I'm hoping I'm not wrong, but it was one of the architects who designed the city layout was an American by some weird name from back in the day.
Mm.
I hope I'm right on that, because if
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
Australians listening, my bad, I'm sorry. But it's like a lot of roundabouts,
We got the roundabouts. Yeah.
circles everywhere. But kind of like how you said, as compared to Sydney and Melbourne, there's a lot of nature and parks and whatnot, because it's surrounded. Like once you leave the city limits, you're in the bush,
In the
the bush
bush.
capital.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like planted in the middle, away from everywhere. Because in looking into why it was chosen, one of the reasons they did choose it was was partly because it is pretty close to Sydney.
Hmm.
We have those, transports for,
Yeah.
items and foods and all that kind of stuff, especially in
Yeah.
the 1900s.
Mhm.
But with the surrounding mountains and all, like in case there was an invasion or something, they had planned that. So you had natural defenses,
Mhm.
and like you started, Sydney's humid as hell, and you got the nice,
Yeah.
airy mountain air coming through to
Yeah.
cool it down. So it was a lot more comfortable for
Yeah.
them. Back then, they knew this was going to be a good place for people to be. Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
and it seems like, yeah, all the wild, wildlife and wild people, like they're going to stick to the shores in the Melbourne, Sydney.
Yes.
Um, which is
Exactly.
it's actually funny into looking into how this city became the capital, because when I spoke with Gregoire, he mentioned specifically of the rivalry between Sydney and Melbourne.
Yeah.
He more
It's
so put it
huge.
on. Yeah, he more so put it on the football teams, but here, knowing that they've been battling for over 100 years, apparently.
It didn't surprise me when you said that, and I was like, oh, yeah, that makes more sense. And it's always that thing of like, yeah, Sydney's better than Melbourne, and no, I have the best city, I live in the best place. It's that kind of thing. But then with
Yeah,
the football teams added on top of that as well, oh my goodness. So you have
yeah,
the football team, so you have AFL here, so Aussie rules football.
yeah,
Which actually doesn't exist anywhere else. and then and then you have rugby as well,
yeah.
which is like rugby, similar to American football. So yeah, so that you add that on top of it, and there's always that rivalry between the two states. And I'm in the middle. I'm like, oh well, I don't follow either, so I'm completely neutral. It
Yeah.
doesn't bother me.
I get that where I'm from. I live in the South, in South Carolina here in the
Yeah,
state.
yeah.
And so football all over the place. They got
Mhm.
Clemson Tigers, big college football area for sure. But
Right,
I'm
right.
more of a basketball guy.
Hmm.
And so I don't care about football at all. And speaking of basketball, I don't know if you're a basketball fan or know anything about basketball, but if anyone from Canberra is listening, they have a Spurs player by Patty Mills, who's an
Right.
Australian from Canberra,
Oh,
and
right,
that just
really?
yes, and
There we
that
go.
got to me because I'm a Spurs fan anyways.
Oh, right.
So speaking to somebody from there, and hopefully someone originally from there that's listening, hell yeah, go Patty Mills and the Spurs.
Okay,
I'm all
Patty.
for
Oh,
that.
there we go. That's so cool. I'll have to look at
Yeah.
Patty Mills. Okay, I'm gonna write that down. I'm not a big basketball fan, but
Uh-huh.
I'm netball fan. So I don't know if you know.
Okay.
Do you know netball? Netball? No, I think it's
If it has
only
another name, maybe. Is there an American name? Is there something we call it? Because we like to change things up apparently.
true. I don't know actually. It's very similar to and so this is something that I was looking into recently. So my daughter's just started playing netball, and I used to play netball at school. So it's very, very similar to basketball, but mostly females play it. And what I found whilst I was doing my own research and to explain to my daughter like where it's come from, what countries play, they played in the Olympics, all of that stuff, is that it's mostly Commonwealth countries that have been playing netball. So
Mm-hmm.
as in Canada, New Zealand, Australia, we have, I think, Jamaica as well. So there was a few other countries. I think there was another one, New Guinea. I don't know if it's Papua New Guinea. But yeah, really
Okay.
smaller countries, but also, and it just seemed to be a theme. So maybe
Yeah.
it's a Commonwealth thing that it's that's been mostly played. But yeah, I found that really interesting. So Australia pretty much kill it when it comes to netball. So Australia, New Zealand tends to be, but yeah, I love it. I really love the game. So very similar to basketball. You
Yeah,
don't bounce
I'm
it or
looking at it right
anything.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and just like you said, it says netball is popular in many Commonwealth nations,
There we go.
in schools, and is predominantly played by women. But I'm
Yeah.
looking at it, and very, very similar to basketball. It kind of looks like basketball without a backboard.
Yes, that's
I'm
right. It
not,
has no backboard. Yeah, that's right. So, and when you don't bounce. So you don't, when you catch it, you don't run and bounce with it. It's actually a
okay.
foul if you do that. So you have to catch it, and as you land with 1 foot, 1 and 2 feet at a time. So it's interesting. It's very similar. It's like some of the rules have been taken out.
Yeah,
And the other ones have been put back in, but we played at school back in the UK, and we played lots of tournaments as well with my high school, and yeah,
yeah,
I was really good at it. And now I'm seeing my daughter play it again. I'm like, man, I miss this. I should get back
yeah.
into this again.
Well, okay. So if dribbling is against the rules, do you just walk and hold it, I guess, or do you have to like pass?
So you catch it, you pretty much catch it, and then you pass it on. So it's really, really fast paced.
Okay.
And everyone has their positions, just like they would do in
Yes.
basketball, but you have it on your bib. You're either a goal defense or goalkeeper or whatever, and you have your sections within the court in which you can go and which you can't go. So it makes it kind of easier as to know where everyone is and what their roles are. So yeah, it's a really good game. So if you ever, I'm sure if you YouTube it or something like that,
Oh, I'm
you
going
just
to now.
catch a clip of it, and you see these women playing. They're so fast, and I was like, wow, I loved it. I remember our school teacher showing us like, this is what it looks like to compete, in the
Yeah.
Olympics at the highest level. This is how fast it needs to be. And we were like, oh my god, we need to step it up.
Are
Yeah.
there like basketball is dunking allowed, or do you have to only
No,
shoot?
you have to
No
shoot it.
dunking. Ah,
No dunking, so it doesn't have that same kind of like, oh my god, look at
yeah.
that.
Well, I mean, you don't have that, but I'm gonna imagine without a backboard, you have to be way more accurate.
Yeah, that's right.
So
So
if anything, that's a lot more skill because you have to make sure that shot's going in.
but exactly, you're not going to waste it. So you have points in which you can shoot from. You have 2/3 of the court, I think it is. So that's that last third. You can shoot from anywhere inside of there, and some girls like take it and they get in,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh my god, how did she do that? But yeah, you've got to be really on point with that.
Whoa.
It's a
All
cool
right.
sport. I love it. I do love
Yeah.
watching it.
Yeah. Now I kind of want to watch like a 3-point contest between American basketball and netball people because
Yeah, there we go.
I'm now gonna my money's gonna be on netball people because you gotta have a good shot if you ain't got a
Yeah,
backboard.
that's right. There's no backboard. You've really got to get it in there, and it's all in the action of the wrists and
Yeah.
making
Oh
sure
yeah.
you're
All in
getting
the
it
flick
right.
of the wrist.
All in
Okay.
the flick of the wrist, exactly.
All
It's so good.
Okay, I am enjoying this one. That is for sure. This is nice. Um, well,
Yeah, it's
what?
nice to know that someone else likes it, because I normally talk about it. They're like,
I've
what?
never even heard of this. I've never even heard of netball. Like I'm thinking like that's another name for tennis or something
No.
else, you know.
Yeah.
Um, one of the weird things I came across in terms of Cambria is there's the National Museum of Australia, right?
Yep.
That's somewhere you've been? Have you been there yet?
Yes. Yeah. Not far from where the sculpture gardens are.
Okay. So in the National Museum of Australia, they have the gigantic preserved heart of the champion racehorse. Do you remember this?
No, I don't remember that.
So apparently, this racehorse was born in New Zealand. His name was Parlap. I know I'm saying that wrong. PHAR space LAP. So I'm pretty sure
Yeah, Parlap. Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking too.
Hmm.
But this horse, he was a champion horse from the early 1900s. He won 37 of his 51 races. And sadly, Parlat tragically died suddenly after his first North American win in 1932. They never figured out the cause of death. They speculate cheating and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's America. Who knows? But Australia and New Zealand went into mourning for the horse. It was like a national hero. I'm guessing back then.
Yeah.
The skeleton of the horse is in the New Zealand National Museum, while the hide of the horse is mounted in the Melbourne Museum. But his heart is apparently in the National Museum of Australia in Canberra. And it says here, his massive heart weighing almost 14 pounds.
Wow.
Apparently twice as big as the average horse's heart.
Wow.
So
I didn't even know that. I don't.
Next time you go, look out for his heart.
You know what? When I was there at the National. Oh no, so it was they had a different exhibition on. Sorry, I remember seeing like a big animal in the foyer, but that was actually for they did a DreamWorks animation exhibition, exhibiting all of the work and how it was done and all that stuff. And I took my kids, but it was actually like a tall giraffe. And I thought in my head, I was like, I'm sure I saw some sort of horse, whatever, but it wasn't. It was a giraffe. But I will remember to check that out. I didn't know that. So I have heard the name Parlap before, but it's not something that rings a bell that I obviously took notice of. But yeah, who knew? Who knew? Well, goodness, right? He's scattered all over the Australia, poor thing.
Right, yeah. I mean, even more so his heart being so big.
I know.
That's unique. That's unique for sure.
Horse racing here. So talking about that. So I don't know if you've heard about do you know about the Melbourne Cup?
I've never heard of it. From where I'm at in Carolina, we're technically considered thoroughbred country. So a lot of horse racing people around the area, not me necessarily. So I'm sure like I could walk to my neighbor and they would know it.
They would know. Okay. So this is another big kind of cultural thing about Australia, which is interesting. So I'm not into horse racing. I don't have any horses or anything, but there are a lot of people, and because of the sheer vast size, a lot of people who live rurally. I have a friend that has 2 horses. They have like a property out in outside of Melbourne, huge. All of that stuff, and that's normal because they've got a farm, so they need to be able to get around, etc. But here in Australia, there's the Melbourne Cup. So the Melbourne Cup takes place now. Forgive me, I think it is October or November, but I think it's October every year, and it's in the state of Victoria where Melbourne is. It's a public holiday. That's how big it is.
For a horse race.
For a horse race. Exactly, Jamie. So when I moved here, I was like, you what now? They got a public holiday for the Melbourne Cup? Are you serious? Anyway, so it's a huge event. There's the race. They call it the race that stops the nation. So at 3:00, there's the big race that happens. And now I can't remember the exact name. Everyone has like a bet or whatever, does a sweepstake or whatever, and everyone wins something. But it's huge. And everyone gets dressed up, even if you don't live in Melbourne and you're here in like Canberra, whatever state. There's either the local hotel will have like a Melbourne Cup Day, and everyone gets dressed up and wears their fancy hats. And even here at the racecourse here in Canberra, called Thoroughbred Park, all that everyone goes out and has lunch. Like, it's huge. It's absolutely massive. When I first moved here, I remember the first year, and I found out that so I moved here in the September, and then the following month, October, I was like, why is everyone dressed up? Like, it's a wedding that I didn't know about, or I don't know. It's a huge monumental event, and it's the Melbourne Cup, and I had no idea. It is massive. Like, it's everyone talks about it. Like, even if you're not into it, like, you cannot help but
Yeah.
get involved in some shape or form, or just have an eye out, or listening to the names of the racehorses, which I always find comical. Yeah. Some of the names are so funny. But yeah, it's really interesting. So that's definitely one thing that happens here that's massive. But even in the UK, they have the same thing. But not on this scale. Like, Australians know how to take it, say how to party and to take it to the next level. Like, they don't do things by halves. Like, if they're going to do it, they're going to go all out and do it.
That's very, like you said, very unique and very odd, especially over, like, me and you are looking at it as a typical horse race, but they're looking at something way more. Because even here in the States, we have the Super Bowl Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
Which is like an unofficial holiday. It's not actually a holiday, but every year there's a petition to make it a national holiday. Because I mean, I'm sure if they looked at statistics, production goes down. Monday
and
morning
the day
call.
After, probably.
Oh yeah, exactly. Monday morning call-ins for I'm sick. No, you're hungover, but okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're well aware of it. And even like this morning when I spoke to the lady from the Philippines, Jenny, she was talking about, they have Manny Pacquiao as a boxer, right?
Yes, yeah.
He was in his prime. One of the things I learned, similar to the Melbourne Cup there, is if Manny was fighting, the country watched. Like, so much so traffic was gone, crime would drop, and they would, in big enough parks, they would put up like big screens and project it.
Oh yeah.
And it like, I'm listening to that early today and then hearing this over a horse race, and I thought Americans were wild over, football, and these are countries that stop. Like, ours keeps going. It goes a lot slower, but it's nowhere, it seems, on the scale of Australia with horse racing, or definitely not on the scale of the Philippines when Pacquiao was fighting. That's a whole nother level.
That's another level, exactly. And it is that kind of, and it's funny, they always say it's the race that stops the nation. Make sure you watch, when they're advertising, to come watch it. But it is the race that stops the nation. Like, for that, so the main race that takes place is around 3:00. So guaranteed between 2:30 and probably 3:30, it will be radio silence. Like, it would just, everyone's watching, everyone's like glued to the screens. Like, it's so interesting. And even that whole day, like, there's been days when I've been at work when the Melbourne Cup is on, but no one's not really working. It was just like just waiting for the race. And then we'd get the TV out. I remember one of the guys there got his TV, got his computer screen, got it projected on them. We're all standing around watching it. Like, it's just, it's really interesting how it's an event that kind of brings everyone together at that one time, momentary time. So interesting.
That is very unique for sure. I'm curious now, kind of like with the whole District of Columbia thing, who else I'm gonna talk to later on that they have an event that their whole country joins together, like you just said, and pays attention to. One of the things I was looking, I like to find, like, if there's a certain inventor or an invention from whatever the specific, not necessarily the country, but the specific city that who I'm speaking of or speaking is from, right? I couldn't find a lot. Probably because it hasn't been around for over 100 years, but compared to other cities around the world, that's relatively new, right?
It is. It's a baby,
But one of the ones I found that definitely caught me off guard, because I'm technically using it right now, and you might be as well. Wi-Fi. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
So you are. Okay.
Yeah.
I was hoping I wasn't going to be the only one. Okay, so let me know if I'm wrong. Because what I found is the Wi-Fi method was developed by CSIRO. And this method has caused Wi-Fi to be attributed as an Australian invention, and that CSIRO is stationed in Canberra, although the Wi-Fi trademark is owned by a company in Texas. But technically, for all all, intents and purposes, Cambria invented Wi-Fi,
In
which,
Wi-Fi, yeah.
again, I'm talking to you right now
Yeah,
over
exactly.
Wi-Fi.
That's
I'm
right.
assuming a good bit of the developed world these days has
He's
Cambria
using
to
one.
thank for that.
Exactly. Now, this is interesting because I was doing a project with my son, and we were doing some research online to what was it? We were talking about digital technology. So they have
Okay.
like this school kind of championship going, and he's trying to like get his knowledge up and stuff. And I was like, well, let's look, what we can find. And
Yeah.
then this came up, and I was like, CSIRO, but that's down the road.
Yeah.
That's close to the city. And I was telling him, I was like, when we drive past the Telstra Tower, that big white building, but that's the CSIRO. And he's like, whoa, really? They developed that? I'm like, yeah. I was like, oh my God, that's so much. I
Yeah.
don't know the person's name, but yeah, that's where, so we did. So that's where it was developed. And I suppose that's where it originally came from. And the research is there. So it's like a big research facility.
Yeah.
A government research facility where they look and do not experiments, but test and create things like this. So yeah, we did.
Yeah,
Take it.
I mean, if you think of, the modern world and where we are today, a huge thanks has to go out to that team over there that pulled that off. And it's funny to me, since I've been doing this, the stuff I've learned from various people around the world. Because when I did my episode with a guy from Barbados,
Yeah.
little island in the Caribbean. I don't know if that was one of the ones you listened to.
No, I listened to the last one that you did, the most recent one with the lady from South Africa.
Okay, Barbados was right after that one.
Oh, okay, right, yeah.
But in doing research for the Barbados episode, found out that a native Barbadian by the name of Alan Emtage, if I'm remembering correctly, is credited with their first internet search engine. So if you even think of Wi-Fi, those team of researchers even have to thank him.
Yeah.
It was Archie. He named it Archie for whatever.
Yes, yeah.
I'm assuming it stands for something, but what it stands for, I don't remember. But Alan Emtage, a man from Barbados, is credited with the invention of the world's first search engine, which obviously led the way for that team at CSIRO to come up with Wi-Fi. And here we are talking with people literally halfway on the other side of the planet.
Yeah.
Based on these two people or, these two groups. Yeah.
It's incredible. It's incredible. Like I'm sitting here at my computer. I'm actually not plugged in. Normally I'm plugged into my router directly, but today we're on a good day. The Wi-Fi is holding up, so we're doing all right.
Thank you, Australia.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's good. It's really good.
Yes, definitely. So I want to thank you again for coming on. You're now my second person I've spoken to from Australia. I learned a lot more than I thought I was going to. I figured I did a good enough dive with Gregoire on mine and his. I didn't think, honestly, I'll be honest, I didn't think I was going to learn that much new stuff in this one. But from netball to Wi-Fi, the National Sculpture Garden, just all those blew me away for sure. That's definitely a thing I'm going to visit. Hopefully, if
and
I
the
ever
Melbourne Cup as well, you knew about. You learned about today.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
The race that stops the world. Again, I want to thank you for reaching out and coming and speaking to me. Go ahead and let everybody know. You said you have your, I think you said podcast, definitely a business. I'll give you the last word.
Oh, thank you so much. Honestly, it's been great. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. It's such a great conversation. I love it when they flow naturally and it just see how they evolve. So it's been great. So yes, if You can catch me over at janetkafadar.com. That's my website. And also I have a podcast as well called The Truth About Show, which I really focus on helping women learn the untold truths and unspoken truths about building an online business and actually what it takes and what you should be doing and what you should be thinking about before you jump into it. So you can find that over at janetkafadar.com/podcast or search in any of the podcatchers The Truth About Show. And that's it.
The Truth About Show. All right. Well, I will definitely drop all those links in the description below. Once again, Janet, thank you very much for sitting up and talking with me. Sun's going down on my side of the world here.
It's rising here.
Coming up. So I want to thank you again, and you have yourself a good day.
And you take care, Jamie. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.